Welcome back to the Way Everlasting YouTube channel. My name is Robert. I'm great to be back with you guys this week. Have some fun things to cover this week. I've titled this week the land of Canaan, or Canaan, the key to the end time timeline. We kind of been building up to this, so I'm really excited to talk about this today and build upon some of the other things that we've talked about up to this point. If you want to follow along, you can go to everlastingcovenant.org / revealing the end time.pdf, all one word. So let's jump right into it. So, if I shared with you that by understanding the promised land boundaries, that it would unlock several key prophecies in Scripture regarding the end time, including a little known war, the sixth trumpet, and others, you would likely say I was crazy. So let's get into this study. So just what are the boundaries of Israel in Scripture, and why would they be key to an end time timeline and Mashiach's return? And we need to start our studying the words of Moses in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. So we can go to the Blue Letter Bible on the website and pick our favorite version, whatever that is. I use the Hebrew Names version, and then we can look at this verse together. So Deuteronomy 1, 6 through 8, it says, Yahweh, our Elohim, spoke to us in Horeb, saying, you have lived long enough in the mountain. Turn you, take your journey, and go to the hill country of the Amorite, or the Amoree, and to all the places near thereinto in the Arabah, in the hill country, and in the lowland, and in the south, by the seashore, the land of Canaan, or the land of the Ka'anaim, plural, and Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Parat in the Hebrew, but it's become known as the river Euphrates. And behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land, which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov, to give them to their seed after them. Now, we've talked about the different places where you see their seed, and in this case, their seed is the descendants of Joseph, of course, through Jacob, his line, and to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, but also all the land of Israel that was presented to the 12 tribes. So what we see in this is that there is a key part of the land that's given to them as a promise, and that's right here. That's the land of the Canaan, or the land of the Ka'anaim, and Lebanon, which is modern day Syria. Now, if you know anything about Scripture, then you know that the borders of Israel are not in Syria. So we're going to talk about that today. Genesis 50, looks like I need to change this word. I had one in there I didn't catch as I copied out of the Blue Letter Bible. So Genesis 15:18, it goes on. Before that, so before we get to Deuteronomy, we have Genesis. In Genesis 15:18, it says, in that day Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt, Mitzrayim, to the great river, the river of Parat, or Euphrates. Now, notice what he says in the sentence. He says, to your descendants, I give this land. And he says, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. So you're probably hearing the chant of the Arab and Muslim extremists in the United States of recent, talking about from the river to the sea. Well, that's what they're talking about, wiping off Israel from the river Euphrates to the Mediterranean Sea. And it just so happens those are the borders of Israel. So Yahweh, he doesn't stop there. He continues in describing the exact borders of Israel. if we look at verse 19, he says the Kenim, the Kenizi, and the Kadmoni, the Hittite in verse 20, the Perizzite or the Perizi, the Raphaim in verse 20, 21, the Emori, the Kanaim, Girgashi, and the Yebusi. So these are tribes that were displaced um, as Israel possessed the land. And then Yahweh continued in this statement later in Genesis chapter 17. We can look at Genesis chapter 17, verse 7 and 8. And yes, we are studying about the end time, but if you don't understand this, it's a true connecting component of understanding the end time timeline, and just how imminent his return really is. So Genesis 17, verse 7, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a Elohim to you and to your seed after you. I will give to you and to your seed after you the land where you are traveling, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. I will be their Elohim. Now, notice the words in this verse. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant. This is the covenant that I talk about in the way. This is a covenant of pitching tents. There's only one covenant. It's the original covenant. It's always been the covenant of pitching tents. As a part of that covenant, you have the land that is promised to Israel. That's the everlasting covenant. If you go to my website, everlastingcovenant.org, the premise behind it, and possessing that name, is to educate people on the everlasting covenant. And we talked about that last week. We talked about the name. We talked about the name represented by the oil, and we talked about wisdom, the codes of wisdom, what we call the loving instruction of the codes of wisdom of Yahweh, the Torah, represented by, of course, the commands given by Yahweh to Moses. But if you'll also notice, he says he gives it to his descendants after him. He says the whole land of Canaan. And if there's any mistake or if there's any misunderstanding, he says where you now reside as a foreigner. So he's very clear that it wasn't land that they already possessed. He says, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you. Now, prior to all this in Genesis chapter 10, we are told the borders of Canaan. So if you're asking, hey, what are the borders of Canaan or the promised land? That's really where it starts. So prior to all this in Genesis chapter 10, we can see Genesis chapter 10, verse 19. We can actually see the borders of Canaan. The border of the Canaim, it's hard to say. Canaim was from Sidon as you go toward Gerar, to Azah as you go towards Saddam, Amorah, Admah, Seboim, and to Lasha. So here the scriptures telling us what the borders of Canaan were. This is important because as I start to show you the map and start to outline the borders, we're going to reach certain position points on the map or cities on the map that scholars today, they would try to argue, hey, there's 15 known locations for this city, and how can you really know what the borders of Israel are? That's why we have to be really smart, led by the Ruach, right, to understand the Father's word, but to also put down those that would come against it. Now, if we look and fast forward to the book of Numbers, we see more instruction from Yahweh on this. Numbers chapter 34, verse 2. Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, command the children of Israel, tell them, when you come into the land of Canaan, there it is again, this is the land that shall fall to you for an inheritance, even the land of the Canaanim, according to the borders of it. And I just read the borders to you. Now, if you're not from the Middle East, specifically, um, from the region where Israel, Syria, Turkey, um, Egypt, if you're not from that region, none of this is going to make any sense to you. So I'm trying to make it real for you. But again, he says, when you come into the land, this is a very important point that we're going to make today. Yahweh gave them the land. He said, now, I'm going to give you the land, but he said, when you come into it. So, yes, they were to take possession of the land, and they did that during the wars of Yahweh under Yehoshua. But also, he gave them clear instruction. And we need to understand this as a reference to the land that Israel has not possessed or had not possessed at that time from the promised land, from the wars of Yehoshua. And we can see in Exodus 23:30, Yahweh tells Israel, behold, I've given you the land. I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm going to go before you, and I'll drive out the inhabitants, but I'm not going to drive them out all at the same time or all at once. Meaning, I'm not going to go and clear the inhabitants that occupy this land right away. You're going to have to go into the land. That's what he was saying. When he said when you come into the land, that's what he's saying, is you're going to have to go into the land. He says, I'll drive them out, but only as you go in and possess the land. If I drive it, and he goes on to say this, if I drove them out all at once, the wild beasts would come in, and you'd have that problem when you arrived before you. And every place you put your foot, I'm sorry, you would have a problem of the wild beasts going in before you, because you wouldn't arrive until after they had already took a foothold. And that wouldn't be safe for you or your families trying to cultivate the land. You'd have to drive the wild beast out first. And that's because the land would be overgrown and desolate, because basically no one would be there to cultivate or to grow in that land. So I'll drive them out little by little before you, every place you put your foot. That's dominion. That's the covenant side of it. I've given it to you for a possession. Now, in other words, it's all there. Yehoshua, all you have to do, it's all yours. All you have to do is go in, lay your foot on the ground. That's dominion. Lay your foot on it and say, hey, this is mine. You have to go in, claim your possession. You have to go in and take by covenant. That's the wah symbol, the tent peg, that which I have given you, and possess the land. Now, before we look at the land that they did possess and how it ties to this end time story, what we want to do is look at the borders of Israel. So if we continue in Numbers chapter 34, we actually have a true outline that the Father has given for the borders of Israel. So Numbers chapter 34, verse 3, beginning in verse 3, it says, then your south border shall be from the wilderness of Zin, along by the side of Edom. And I'll just switch so I don't have to go back and forth. But it says, then your south quarter shall be from the wilderness of Zin, along by the side of Edom. So if we look at a map, and we were to blow this map up, what you would see is right here is the wilderness of Zin, where I have my cursor. Wilderness of Zin, and I'll blow this up as well. But you have the wilderness of Zin, and then what you're seeing in yellow is the southern border of Israel. So the first instruction is, let me do this just so I can take you through it really quick. So the south quarter should be from the wilderness of Zin along the side of Edom. So Edom is here. And then you can go into the south. You have the southern border of Israel. So extending from the Dead Sea is what you'll see. So what he says is your southern boundary will start in the east from the southern end of the Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea is here in blue, the large body of water in the middle. Above that is the Sea of Galilee, the smaller body of water in the middle. And then, of course, the river Euphrates hanging off of it to the east, southeast. But he says your south quarter is along the wilderness of Zin, along the side of Edom, and your southern border will start from the east, start in the east from the southern end of the Dead Sea. And then what it says is it will cross the Scorpion Pass, and it will continue on to Zin and go south of Kadesh Barnea. So the Scorpion Pass is here in the wilderness of Zin. I have it highlighted. So we have the Dead Sea. So it starts at the south end of the Dead Sea and extends across to Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea. So KB is Kadesh Barnea on this map, and then AZ is Asmon. We'll talk about that in a second. So this is the first one where you run into where they're Kadesh Barnea and Mount Hor. There's some controversy over where they were located. I don't see the controversy. It's very much in line with the scripture. Kadesh Barnea is easy to locate on most maps, and it's at the southern end of in between Egypt and the borders of Israel today. So it goes on to say, it says, continue on to Zin and go south of Kadesh Barnea. Okay, and then it will go to Hazar Adar and over to Asmon, where it will then turn. So on the map, you have the borders going through the Scorpion Pass, going to Kadesh Barnea to Asmon, and then it says it will turn. It will turn, and when it turns, it will go to, it will join the river of Egypt, and end the southern border will end at the Mediterranean Sea. So here on the map, we have it turning and connecting to the river of Egypt here, and then it will end, the southern border will end at the Great Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so when they say river to the sea, we have of course, the Euphrates River, and then we have the Great Sea called the Mediterranean Sea, and that's the southern border. So you can see that here in the verses we just looked at. Now, this is what I just read. Let me see if I can show this real quick. Just another way so I don't have to flip. Let's see. Okay, it shows it, but it's too small. Okay, that's fine. I think that's because it's like this. Yes. Okay. Now we can do it. Now that's the southern border. Then we're going to go to the western border. So the western border is very simple. The scripture says that the western border, your western border, will be the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and this will be your boundary on the west. So Yahweh just simply says, hey, look, I'm going to go back to the picture. Take the Mediterranean Sea and follow it north. Okay? So you have the Mediterranean Sea is the western border according to Scripture. Okay? Now, what we do is we get to the northern border. All right, so the northern border is where we see from the northern border, we run a line from the Mediterranean Sea to Mount Hor. And this is one of the controversial things where people say, well, we don't know where Mount Hor is. It's ridiculous. Okay, if you come up here north of Israel, okay, now notice there's another map here, and this map is showing the borders of Israel in green, where effectively the children of Israel stopped. That was the land that was allotted by Moses and Joshua. But the promised land, even further north than that, you can see went up into basically Syria, but they didn't possess it, and that's what we were talking about. So if we did extend north on this map, you can see Mount Hor here in the top left corner, and that's what I'm showing here. The MH on this other map is Mount Hor, so that's where the northern border would start. Now, some, I don't even want to call them scholars, they think that Mount Hor is down here in the wilderness of Zin. How does that make any sense if the northern border of Israel is next to the southern border of Israel? It makes no sense. It's very easy to see Mount Hor is up here in Syria, near Syria, um, uh, on the map, right? Most maps. So we have Mount Hor. So it tells us the northern border is going to run from the Mediterranean Sea to Mount Hor. So all along the western coast, Mediterranean Sea is going to go up to Mount Hor. And then from Mount Hor, it's going to go to Lebo Hamath. That's Lebanon. So where I have LB here, that's Lebanon, basically. It's an approximation because this map isn't perfect. But you have Lebanon here as the first stop. And then he says from Lebanon, you're going to go to the borders. The going out of the northern border will be at Zedad. Now, in Syria, this is in Syria today, and that is Sedad. Sedad, okay? So Sedad is the northern tip of Israel's border, and it says the going out of it. So that's the transition from the northern border to the east. And I have SD on the map to show Sedad, and you can see it's really, really close to Damascus. This is very important because I'm going to read you a scripture here in a minute that connects the end time timeline, and Damascus is the star of that scripture. It is going to be the focal point. So I don't want you to miss this. But the traditional borders of Israel right now, they don't extend this far into Syria. But the scripture's telling us that this was land that they were supposed to possess. Now, from Lebanon, from Lebanon to Zedad. So from Zedad, continue on to Ziphron and end at Hazar Enan. So there's three cities together here on the map. But we're going to go from Zedad to Ziphron. Okay. ZH is Ziphron right here. That little dot is the city. So Zedad to Ziphron. And then from Ziphron to end at Hazar Enan. So we have Sadat, Ziphron, and Hazar Enan. And that ends the northern border. Then it says, this will be your boundary in the north. Okay. Now we go to the eastern border. It says for your eastern border, run a line from Hazar Enan to Shephem. And that's what we did. We took Hazar Enan and we ran straight down to Shephem. Okay. And you can see Shephem right here, approximately. So that's the starting of the eastern border. And then the boundary will go now from Shephem to Riblah on the east side of Ain. Okay. And then continue along the slopes east of the Sea of Galilee, Kinneret. So remember, this is the Sea of Galilee, so we're going to go towards that direction. And what you'll notice is we go from Selakah, that's area, that region, and then we have Shephem cutting across. And what it's doing is cutting across the northern territory of Gad, the tribe of Gad. Okay, so what you're seeing is 9 tribes, the 9 tribes of Israel's land. We have Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh right here in the north. That it didn't cross into Gad's territory or down into Reuben. They had their own inheritance. So we're talking about who is identified as Israel in the scripture at this point. Um, so we go over to the Sea of Galilee, which is this little small body of water right here. And then from the Sea of Galilee, we're going to go down to, it says this, verse 12, then the boundary will go down along the Jordan and end again at the Dead Sea. This will be your land with its boundaries on every side. So we go from the Sea of Galilee, we go down the Jordan River. That's what he said. Follow the Jordan River south, and then that will hit the Dead Sea, and that's the borders of Israel in the land of Canaan. So to illustrate this point, I have another map, and I'll blow this one up because it's a little small. But you can see right here on this map, the borders of Israel on this map right here. The land of Canaan is the kind of the light, I don't know what color that is, like light brownish color. But then this violet highlight is what we consider Israel, or the land of Israel today. And I know this isn't exact, but what I want to show you is that the land of Canaan, which did belong to Israel, went all the way into Egypt. It went into Turkey. It went into Syria. It went into Jordan. I mean, it went all the way around Israel. This is going to be a very important part, in fact, to understand as we continue our study. So we ended in verse 12. So now we know the borders of Israel very, very clearly, right? Very simple to map out. Takes a little bit of time, but we know them. Now Moses commanded the Israelites, continue in verse 13 and 15, it says, assign this land by lot as an inheritance. Yahweh has ordered that it be given to the 9.5 tribes, because the families of the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh have already received their inheritance. And that's the reason it was drawn out that way, because we're in the book of Numbers at this point. So Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh have already received their inheritance. That's the reason it's being drawn out that way. So naturally, obviously, the borders of Israel would extend, the full borders of Israel would extend south along the borders of the proper borders of Gad, Reuben, and then connect back into the Dead Sea. Okay, so and he says they've already received their inheritance east of Jordan, across from Jericho toward the sunrise. Okay, so here's a few maps of what that may look like. I shared that with you. I put the just the indicators on the map here, just in case anybody gets confused. Again, this map in green is showing the promised land start, and then extending that into the purple here was the land that they were supposed to go in and conquer. Now we know that they didn't conquer all the land, and that's really kind of the conversation for today. I also included the map of Mount Hor, in case people want to debate this. I mean, it's pretty obvious Mount Hor is right off of the Mediterranean Sea, the mountains of north in the mountains of north of Sea of Galilee. Okay, and then we talked about how this was outlined in violet. Notice how the land though is much larger than the current tiny footprint that's kind of been allocated for Israel at this point, for the nation of Israel, I should say. Now this leads us to two primary prophetic end-time views. And you're like, what in the world are you talking about, Robert? Stay with me. The first one and most common is that all, and I put that in quotes, all the land promised to Israel, known as the promised land, is for a future time. A future time. This is according to Ezekiel's prophecy, and this is what they'll quote, Ezekiel chapter 47, verse 13 through 23. Then what this is referred to in Ezekiel chapter 47, verse 13 through 23, is really the land of the 12 tribes, but it's the land of the 12 tribes that has been promised, but it's in the restored kingdom of Elohim when Mashiach returns. But there's another view of this. It's a very I would say it's a very little known view. I mean, I gave my life to Yeshua when I was 15. I'm 46 now. I've only heard this one time in all the ministers that I've ever heard in teachings in my life on prophecy. And I studied prophecy pretty well in terms of just time putting it into it, is what I mean. So, that's the reason I say that this is a little known view in prophecy that may serve a significant clue as to the timing of Yeshua's return. It's found in several key scriptures and verses, starting in Psalms 83. Now, Psalms 83 is known as the Psalm 83 War. It is called the Psalm of Asaph, and Asaph means gatherer, or bringing together in the Hebrew. And basically, Psalms 83 says a psalm of Asaph, or the gathering, or the bringing together, and there's a particular reason for it, right? It says, "O Elohim, do not remain silent, do not turn a deaf ear, do not stand aloof, don't stand afar from me. O Elohim, see how your enemies growl, how your foes rear their heads, sorry. With cunning they conspire against your people, they plot against those you cherish. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation so that Israel's name is remembered no more. With one mind they plot together, they form an alliance against you, the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab, the Hagrites, the Byblos, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, with the people of Tyre or Tyre, even Assyria has joined them to reinforce Lot's descendants." We've talked about this a lot in who was Israel, who Assyria was, what they became, and Israel's role in Assyria as well when they were led captive. Now, in this verse and in Isaiah 17, we see, and I'll read that, Isaiah 17, 1 and 14. If we want to turn to that one, we can. We're going to read a parallel verse that matches Psalms 83. It's the burden of Damascus, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus, or Damascus, is taken away from being a city. It's been destroyed. It shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Aror are forsaken. They shall be for flocks which shall lie down. None shall make them afraid. The fortress shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus. The remnant of Aram, they shall be as the esteem of the children of Israel, says Yahweh of hosts. Okay. We can keep going. Basically, down to verse 14, it says, at evening, behold terror, and before the morning, they are no more. We're talking about the city of Damascus in Syria. This is the portion of those who despoil us, and the lot of those who rob us. The lot of those who rob us. So, between Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17, 1 and 14, we see an attack on Israel. But there's some interesting clues here about this attack on Israel that helps us identify where or what point in time this occurs. Number one, this attack on Israel, these attackers, those names that it's sharing, okay, they all share common borders with Israel during this attack. Now, in the past, we would conjecture that it would be the Islamic State, it would be Russia, but at present, with the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, resulting in Israel bombing the Iranian city of Lebanon, killing two of their top commanders and five other military or political personnel of Iran's military, we finally may be able to put a face to this attacker. Now, if it's Iran with the support of Russian assets through Syria and Damascus, who have been behind, a lot of these terror plots, and we see that just a few short months ago, Iran launched its largest missile attack on Israel ever seen, with hundreds of drones and thousands of missile strikes. Of course, Israel, right, has the greatest missile defense system in the world, and because of the United States, because we are Israel, and defending our people, defended Israel through the Iron Dome, the missile defense system, and of course by Yahweh protecting Israel from these attacks. Now, if we look at the prophecy from Isaiah, the one I just read to you, about Damascus becoming a smoking hole, then we get more clue. Um, Isaiah 17:1 and verse 14, Isaiah, these, this verse quantifies the timing of the attack and the type of the attack. So it gives us another clue as to uh, understanding when the attack would occur and what would be the effects of the attack. So I said in verse 17 of Isaiah 17 that it says, "At evening, behold terror, and before the morning, they are no more. Now, this is the portion of those who despoil us, and a lot of those who rob us." Now, pay attention to these words. The Hebrew definition for despoil is plunder, and to rob is to spoil, plunder, prey upon, seize. So many attacks on Israel have resulted in much bloodshed, but few attacks, like the most recent one from Hamas against Israel, match these exact words. On October 7th, 2023, as part of the Hamas-led attack on Israel, at the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war, Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups abducted 251 people from Israel to the Gaza Strip. It included women, children, and elderly people. Now, as of this writing, only 116 hostages have been returned alive to Israel. Think of that verse and the connection to it. The portion of those who despoil us and those who rob us. Okay, so they kidnapped 251 people. Okay, as of this writing, only 116 hostages have even been returned alive to Israel. They not only kidnapped them, they plundered them. Right, like you would think of a pirate, plundering. That's effectively kind of the language or the vision that you're the vision that you should have about this. 105 released in prison exchange deal, 4 released by Hamas unilaterally, and only 7 rescued by the Israel Defense Forces, IDF. There's another 65 hostages were reportedly killed on October 7th and or are in Hamas captivity, according to Israel. As of July 24, 115 hostages remain in captivity in the Gaza Strip, 111 of whom had been abducted on October 7th, 2023. The other 4 hostages having been captured earlier, including more children. Israel has quite literally been despoiled, robbed of its people, as Isaiah prophesied. But what makes this prophecy special, we believe, is that the end result is that Damascus, the capital of Syria, becomes a smoking hole of waste. So what that means in the scripture, it says, in these places where the cities once existed, after this event, they will now be herding their flock of sheep. It will be so desolate from people that the sheep won't even be bothered by people, is effectively what that verse was saying. The sheep will be grazing in what was once the cities of Syria. The prophecy continues and brings us to today's lesson. Isaiah 17 verse 3 says, "The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom of Damascus." Now, Damascus is the Syrian regime's center of gravity. It's the seat of power for the Assad regime. Damascus has always been heavily militarized, and has hosted a high portion of the Syrian armed forces. Bashar al-Assad is the president of Syria and the commander-in-chief of the Syrian armed forces and of the Arab Socialist Party. During the recent Arab Spring, under threat of strike by U.S. in support of protesting Syrian Arabs of Assad's regime, so you have uh, free, loving, uh, democratic, desiring Arabs fighting against Assad as the president of Syria, wanting their freedom. And you had the United States and the Arab Spring supporting that until Obama came in, and then he shut it down. Um, and we all know why he did that. Um, so Assad enlisted support, and he began augmenting his forces with foreign fighters to put down the riots, to put down the burning, the outcry, right, of all the people crying for a change in their government. Um, he namely made agreements with Hezbollah and the Iraq Shia militias, and then he brought in militias, other militias, pro organized militias, to help put down the revolts and the protests. Now, ever since this influx of manpower to put down dissidents over his rule, Assad's has bolstered and increased levels of support from Iran and Russia. He's been critical to the regime's military strategy. As a result, Syria is a hotbed for attacking Israel. And very specifically, it's believed that Syria, Damascus, is the supply chain route for funneling arms into Iran's proxies. Now, I know we're getting into some subjects that folks are saying, what are you talking about, Robert? Damascus is the Syrian Iranian center of gravity, okay? As a result of this war, the Psalm 83 war, spoken of and prophesied by Isaiah as well, we believe Israel has started with the attacks on Hamas, if we're right, as a result of the October 7th massacre that Israel has started. They launched a war campaign that will lead us to our next prophecy of Israel taking its walls down. Now, this is a very important thing to understand, because when you examine Psalms 83 and you look at Isaiah 17, there's some key facts here. It's an Islamic coalition or Islamic state that shares the borders of Israel that attacks Israel. The attackers share that common border with Israel. The city of Damascus and some of the cities in Syria are destroyed as a result of this war. Israel wins the war. As a result, though, they remove the walls surrounding Israel. And then what that means is Israel gains the promised land of Canaan and the spoils of war, the rockets that are continually being fired against them. Now, as a result of this war, Israel borders are expanded into the original land of Canaan, what we know as the Promised Land. And it's taken back as prophesied as an inheritance before Mashiach's return, not afterwards. And there's a verse in Hebrews that we can talk about and we will share. But I want you to understand that this sparks a future war with Russia. So first, we need to understand that as a result of this war, Israel's walls of defense, they're taking down. Now, if you don't know, in 2000, Israel, and I'm showing pictures here, Israel built massive walls around Israel. They call it the barrier, to protect Israel from the rocket fire and to protect Israel from being attacked by Palestinians, and not necessarily Palestinians, the Arab states trying to attack them, uh, to come against them because of the state of Palestine. right? Everybody wants a two-state solution. Um, and until then, there won't be peace. So the only way for Israel's walls to come down, though, which protect them from Iran Arab proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the rocket attacks, it's going to be for Israel to do the unthinkable in most scholars' eyes, and that is to wage war with the nations directly surrounding Israel and take back enough land that they can feel safe to take down their walls as a result. This means most likely the original borders of Canaan to give them enough of a land buffer and control to prevent any more rocket or missile attacks. Israel has not controlled this entire land area. In Joshua's time, much of the land of Canaan was brought under Israelite control. In the time of David and his son Solomon, a wide area of land was under Israel's control or influence. Yet that entire territory promised to Israel in Scripture, both in Joshua chapter 1, verse 4, and elsewhere, it has yet to be fulfilled. And you have to take one of two views. It will be they will continue to take the land before Mashiach returns, as promised, as the inheritance, or they will receive the land in the promised time of the Mashiach and his return. Now we believe that this is an important clue because while Arab and Muslim sympathizers chant from the river to the sea, like we've never heard before, even in the United States, we have sympathizers now that are heavy socialist democratic supporting entities, that they outline the very land Yahweh gave Israel in covenant. That phrase, from the river to the sea, is outlining the very land Israel has been given in covenant. Now, there's much more to this study here, but we'll need to save it for later because this leads us to a turning curve, if you will, in studying the end time. And it's going to give us a new way of looking at the possible timeline of events surrounding the return of Mashiach. Now, I know I didn't give all the details of Psalm 83 and Isaiah. We're going to look at Ezekiel 38, 39, 40, 41, other verses that are going to further clarify this. So stay with me. Now, there's much to study here, but we're going to need to save it for later, okay? So, are the modern events of Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran setting us up for the sixth trumpet? Now, if you don't know, the sixth trumpet, without getting into too much detail, is effectively World War III. It's a war where a third part of mankind dies. A third part of mankind. So if there's 12 billion people, 13 billion people on the planet, you do the math, that's billions of people dying. Does it happen all at once? Does it happen over time? That's what we're going to study and we're going to look at. Is this Psalm 83 war the catalyst that starts us down this road? And could it be the final road to that, getting to that 7-year period that the scripture likes to talk about? And that's what we're going to start to break down. We see in Revelation 9, 14, and 15 that the four angels that are bound at the great river Euphrates, are freed, who have been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year, so that they might kill 1/3 of mankind. So what it's saying is for that sixth trumpet, it all centers around this region. So there are flashpoints, if you will, like the Psalm 83 war, like the Gulf War, others that continue to push us forward in the end time timeline to Mashiach, to his return. And what you'll notice, the river Euphrates, it runs through Syria, it runs through Iraq, it runs through Turkey. It's if you look at where Israel struck Iran, it wasn't in Iran, it was in the consulate in Syria where they killed the two um, top commanders. So think about what's really, really happening here. This is a very critical flashpoint, if we're right, that leads us down this path of the Psalm 83 war. Now, what this does is it's going to outline for us a new prophetic timeline, a new prophetic timeline. Oh, tell me that you guys didn't see that the whole time. This is the map. So you have Euphrates down to Syria and Iraq. You have the Euphrates River going through Syria and Iraq. So, and these are the walls of Israel that surround Israel. You can see that they are significant. They are massive. They were built in 2000. They continue to build them and iron barriers around Israel to this day. Now, what I want to draw your attention to for our next round of studies is this timeline, because now we're going to shift. Now we're going to shift to a non-traditional timeline and events to help us piece together the end time events. And what you'll notice is I'm going to start this timeline where we are in the timetable. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover the first 5 trumpets. We're going to talk more about the Psalm 83 war and Damascus being destroyed. We're going to talk about the Gog-Magog war, number 1, in Ezekiel 38 and 39. We're going to talk about the 6th trumpet in more detail. We're going to talk about the 7th trumpet and where the rapture appears in Scripture. Now, I say that because the Scripture shows that there's 2 raptures. We're going to talk about that as well. Anti-Messiah appearance, 2 Thessalonians 2:8. Then the tribulation, Revelations chapter 6 through chapter 19. Then the second coming, Revelation 19. Then we have the 1,000-year reign, Revelation 20. We have the Gog-Magog war, number 2, after Satan is released again to deceive. Then we have Judgment Day, Revelation chapter 20. And then we have the 8th day, Revelation chapter 21. So I wanted to show you this because while today was maybe a little bit of an off subject, it's very important to understand the borders of Israel and the 2 thoughts that could lead to the flashpoint for the rest of what we're seeing in the world today, leading up to, make no mistake, leading up to the 6th trumpet. And that's where we're headed. And that's the reason I showed this to you today. So there won't be a timeline update. We'll do that next week when we connect. But this gives you a good insight into where the study is going, in case you think it's maybe going too slow or maybe not going fast enough, depending on your perspective. If you're really a astute Scripture studier, you studied prophecy a lot. So stay with me. I think that there's some fresh insight that the Father wants to share with us, wants to get out there, to his people to start preparing for, looking for, understanding better, talking about, helping be a stronger witness in the earth. So I look forward to connecting with you again.